Yes, we are going to be recording it tonight. And look at my sheet. All right. So welcome everybody to UX and ATX. I am so glad you're here for our August program. My name is Cindy Brummer. I am one of the organizers of this meetup, and we're very excited. I think we're close to 900 members now on the meetup group, which is really exciting. I want to introduce my two co-organizers, Amanda White and Andrina Dyer. I literally could not do this without their help in coming up with ideas and panelists and helping organize this, because as they will tell you, I'm very disorganized. If I could ask you guys to go ahead and change your name on Zoom to a real name so that we don't refer to you as like your phone number, especially if you're asking questions. That way we know who you are. And you know, if you would love to start like sharing your LinkedIn profiles with everyone now in the chat, feel free to do that. Do start to slow things down as the questions start coming in, because we want to make sure we don't miss any good questions. Let's see, what else do I need to tell you about? I would love for you guys to join our Slack channel if you haven't already done so. The link to join is in the home of the meetup group, so join us there. I've been sharing job stuff. Hopefully that's helpful. And then, Andrina, do we want to talk about the Facebook group? How's the Facebook group coming along?
So yeah, we are very active there too. We also post a lot of jobs and resources mostly, and also the recording for all our meetups are being posted there as well. So for
Yes.
all those that are telling, can't stay for the whole time, you can go there and join us.
Yes, exactly. Facebook group. And I do want to recognize our working website group that has been working tirelessly for the past few months on the new website. They're almost into hi-fis now for the design, and then it'll start getting built. We should have hopefully a website by the end of the year. So I just want to publicly thank them for all their hard work of what they're doing, because we got a chance to take a look at it yesterday. Man, I'm just so impressed with what this group is doing, and I've stepped way back, so this is all their work, not mine at all. Okay, so let me run you through the agenda for the evening. Again, we are recording this. What we're going to do is I'm going to introduce our three panelists that have come here for our topic tonight, which is challenges women face in design. Feel free to share questions in the chat. When we kind of get to, there might be a part where we stop asking questions, and we'll invite you to kind of pop off mute in order to ask a question. But if you could go ahead and mute yourself, just so like wrestling and like children running around in the background don't disturb the conversation, okay? All right, let's get started. Oh, one thing. We do have a September portfolio review. A lot of people are signed up for it. So if you are a portfolio reviewer, we would love for your help. Please reach out to me so that we can have you attend and help us review portfolios. We will be sending out a spreadsheet in advance so you can sign up to have your portfolio reviewed. We may not get to everybody, but we will do our best. We are still formulating our September meetup, but please know that in October, we have an awesome one coming up on UX in the gaming industry. So if you're interested in what does it all mean when those games, is there UX in games? Yes, there is. In fact, one of our panelists tonight is part of the gaming industry, and she'll be on that panel as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guests tonight. First, we have Sydney Terris. She is a UX designer at Activision Studios Raven Software. She's working on Call of Duty, the franchise for that. She is fascinating. She comes from a background in theoretical physics, and she did women's and gender studies. She's someone that I know from my graduate program at MICA, and I'm really glad she's here. We also have Abigail Bravo. I also know her from my graduate program. She's pursuing her master's degree there, and she's really an up-and-coming UX designer, has did a little bit in communications before she moved over and has been fast tracking through a couple of different jobs there. I did not do that justice, Abby, so please forgive me for that. And then Christina Moritz, I'm just going to read this to you because it's fascinating. She takes pride in building positive, enthusiastic, and collaborative cultures while crafting meaningful experiences for both brands and consumers. She is the UX strategy and research manager for Crate and Barrel. So she's been leading research efforts for e-commerce as well as lending a strategic eye toward the customer shopping journey. So which is really fascinating since that's a very different world than I have not been in, which is in the corporate world. She holds a BFA in graphic design from Marietta College. She's worked in the sports and fitness industries, and she built the first in-house UX team for life fitness. I wanted to say lifetime. Sorry about that. Life
Everybody
fitness.
does.
And she's worked at several startups. I am so thrilled to have these three ladies here with us tonight. Can we all just do our silent Zoom welcome to our guests? Thank you. Well, I wanted to go ahead and kick off the discussion because while and I do want to caveat this, that this is not a replacement to a conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion. In fact, that's one of the topics we're looking at doing next. But I'm really interested in just in general what women face when they're going into the design industry, because I know that even in any industry, like when I moved into journalism, it was very challenging. So I really wanted to dive into this subject about what kinds of things do women face and how are they facing them? And what are some of the techniques? Because I know that might be something that a lot of people don't really think about, but I really wanted to dive into this topic. But before we go into the intricacies of it, I did want to get a feel for why you all started in design. Maybe we can start with Abby first.
Hey everybody. Well, so for me, design actually was not what I initially had found interest in. I'm a writer at heart, but then I found graphic design through my undergrad. I kind of ventured into design through taking a coding class and ended up finding out that I was a super nerd in the aspect of I loved the way that there was like this formula that created really intricate layouts and design. And then that integration kind of took me into getting a graphic design minor. And then when I came out, I realized that while I do love writing, the discipline associated with design, specifically user experiences and understanding people, was more of a passion of mine. So I kind of took a 180 in terms of the direction that I thought I was going to go. But when I kind of found coding and then ultimately design, like Cindy had said earlier, I kind of fast tracked and found a way to just put my foot in the door and get in the industry at a very, very low level. And then I've just kind of worked my way up from there.
Christina, what about you?
My journey into UX is a windy road, but into design was a pretty straight path, actually. I actually in high school was in a vocational class where we did everything from like, I'm going to sound old, but I'm really not that old. Like running the darkroom and making plates and running it on the press. And that's how I discovered graphic design. So I took a 2-year vocational course there and then knew I wanted to design in sports and was laser focused on that in college and kind of took the initiative in a lot of ways. And that's what landed me my job out of college then as the graphic designer for the Chicago Bulls hockey team. So at the age of 21, I was blessed with all the hard work paying off. And then it was kind of like, now what? Because I thought that was 10 and 15 years out. And here I was very young, kind of living what I had set out to do. And getting into UX, I went from sports to an agency, took a sideways path there and was a project manager. That was not for me. So I came back to corporate and in-house world as a graphic designer, but learned a lot of tech while at that agency, which I didn't identify with. I think what you'll hear a lot tonight is all my identity crises as I came into UX. So I was like, no, I'm a designer. long story short, got split into 3 people basically, doing your traditional graphic design, creative services, branding work, supporting digital marketing. And then Life Fitness, just as we reference that company, they manufacture all your fitness equipment. So hardware and software and everything that is digitizing in the fitness world, which I'm sure you're all seeing, especially now that we're at home. They were going through that transition and needed a UX UI team. And I had, fortunately, somebody I'd worked with on the product side that just fully believed in me and took that opportunity. And now I'm at Crate and Barrel.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's so many things I want to go back to. We'll have to set up a one-to-one because yeah. Sydney, what about you? What led you into design?
Yeah, hi guys. I very much meandered into this career. I went to college for women's and gender studies and physics, like Cindy said. And from there, I went to grad school at Brown University for physics, pursuing a master's there, and found a lot of unhappiness in that. And in the meantime, I had also been doing internships with the Coca-Cola company. And I sort of lucked into that internship, which I did a couple summers in a row. And I was on their innovations team, and a UX designer on that team really took me under her wing and showed me a lot of her craft. So as things went on, I started to, especially during the first summer, I started to really like it. I loved the team. I loved the people. I really admired all the UX designers I worked with and how diverse their lives were and how many different things and art practices they did. So I got more and more into it, pursued it again another summer. And then when I was in grad school for physics, found a lot of unhappiness, like I said, a lot of gender inequality, and which was not the school itself, it was very much just among peers. So I lucked into, again, another internship with a video game company, which I didn't know was a real job until that happened. And then they invited me back for full time. So I left grad school at that point to start that job with Raven Software, which is where I currently work. And like Cindy said, I am now pursuing a master's in user experience design, but my path very much meandered through this educational versus work experience. And I had 2 good mentors really take a chance on me, and that's how I ended up where I am.
That's great. This is totally not one of the questions on the list, but I was wondering, like, is there something in particular? It sounds like you all found some sort of inspiration in a person that kind of like led you to where you are. What is it that that person did that really, was it just like, oh, hey, here's a career, or was there some particular words, or was it just the way that they showed you? Like, what was it about that that mentor, that guide that kind of helped push you along? Let's start with Christina.
So when I was at Life Fitness, you know, they sliced one person into 3 people, kind of supporting 3 arms of the business. And they didn't have somebody that was proper on the UX side of things as that was coming into play. Just to give everybody some sense of context, your treadmills now all have like a tablet interface. That's one of the products, a mobile app, and all kinds of back-end systems for gyms. And since they made that a category, I had previously kind of just, what happened was there's an agency that fell flat in delivering, and then they lost 6 months on the project. They were like, who can we ask? I had some working relationship. They said, do you want to take on this project? I had no idea what I was doing. Fully transparent. I would be candid with you all night. No idea what I was doing, but I was like, yeah, sure. Fast forward, when it became a category, he approached me, and I think he asked me to leave all the brand work I was doing and was just, I know you can do it, and believing in me for months. Like, this was several months of like, almost to the point of not begging, but like, it was like, I know you can do this. And I him and hawed and just really second guessed myself. And I was like, do you really think I can do this? And talking to other people I was close with in the company, ultimately decided to take that role. And it was the best decision I ever made. I learned more in working for him in 3 years than I had my entire career. Not just from a design position, but a lot about business, how to work your way through political conversations, not in like world politics, but like within a corporate organization. And I learned so much that that's honestly what propelled me forward to even have the confidence to take on another challenge, like going from treadmills and B2B to an e-commerce business, because I also didn't have experience in e-commerce and retail.
Well, it sounds like having someone that believes in you is a real key. Sydney,
Yeah.
what about you? You mentioned like having someone that kind of showed you their craft.
Yeah, that was actually a woman who's a great UX designer, Iris, and I believe she's still at the Coca-Cola company. But Iris really lived and breathed design work, and not just UX design, but graphic design and graphic art, in a way that I had not seen somebody, or I could not personally live the world of physics. I really couldn't. I felt passionate about physics as a topic, but I didn't feel that I could make that my whole life. And there were certain ways I admired Iris and also felt very much like I related to Iris with the different crafts that she would pursue, whether it was knitting something quick or doing a quick painting or doing graphic design for Coca-Cola, whatever it was. She very much lived it in a lot of different facets of her life, which was really inspiring at a time where I felt very disconnected from what I was doing with my life. And then on top of that, her and her mentor very much invited me up to the stage that they were on and included my voice in the talks that they were in and the meetings that they were in and the projects, and really amplified that agency. And that kind of teamwork, I think, was really inspiring. And it was something I, from that point forward, realized I really needed on a team, especially as a woman, to have the leadership, even if it's just one level above, really invite the people that they work with up onto the stage that they've been brought up onto.
You said that so well. I know you're about to take over, but yes.
I know.
All things.
I don't know if you can top that, Abby. What you got?
Oh man, I know. Well, I think I just identify so wholeheartedly with everything you both have said. I think I've had 3 major mentors in my career so far, and they have really shaped the foundation for just how much I've learned and how much I've grown. But I think really the biggest piece, I think you both really hit on, was just like having someone like advocate for you and be your voice and be the person that you can go to ask the questions that like you're so like young and naive or like inexperienced that like you don't want to put yourself in a big room and ask that question, and if in fear of it coming off as that you're not smart or you don't necessarily know everything, but like that's your role, like that's where you are at that point in your career. So your mentor is that guiding hand that is like there for open arms. And my first mentor is actually the reason that I'm in this industry. I came to her and I told her that I just wasn't happy pursuing writing. I just didn't think it was going to fulfill me the way that I needed. And she said, Abby, honestly, you can do anything that you want. What is it that you want? And I will help you get there. And ultimately, she is the one that told me that she knew nothing about UX. And that's what's so great about the initial mentorship that she gave me. She researched as much UX as she could find. She helped me build a website, and she said, we're going to make you a portfolio, and that's how you're going to get there. And like, I have chills thinking about it because without her, I really wouldn't be in this industry. And then my mentor now, I think Christina, you had said that like in the 3 months you had worked with your initial mentor, you had learned the most that you had ever learned in your career, or something to that effect. My mentor now has taught me leaps and bounds among anything I would have ever learned, I think, in any other facet of my career. But I didn't want to go to the company that I'm at because it has me as a developer role and not a designer role. But he has completely taken me under his wing. And every time we walk into a room, he puts my voice above his so that I have that weight and I have that like experience that I can't even begin to explain how much it shaped my career.
Wow, it sounds like advocates, mentors are really important. And maybe I can't assume that it would just be for women, but it sounds like they helped smooth a lot of the path. How do you recommend finding a mentor and advocate? Do you just wait for it to happen? Sydney, what about you? I mean, like what do you think would be the best role for a new designer to take to find a mentor?
I think, just speaking from my experience and what helped me, pursuing the things that you're passionate about, whether or not it's directly related to UX, pursuing the arts that you love or the activities that I mean, it could be hiking. You never know who you're going to meet, especially in like meetup groups and stuff. And I think that those are the best foundations to build mentorship on. And it's really fantastic when you can have those connections with people that you work with or you go to school with. And that's like the most ideal for sure. But if you can't, then and then your coworkers don't relate to you or aren't interested in the same field, or you don't feel that they might have the mentorship skills that you need, then I think the best really is to just pursue the other arts that you're interested in or other groups and just talk to other designers that you admire and tell them that you love their work. I think a lot of people are really happy to talk about their artwork and put a lot of passion into that and are happy to, if they have time and energy, to share that with other folk and help them create their craft and hone that craft. So I think, yeah, for me, it's very much pursuing the things that are already natural to yourself and bringing that out into the world, because I think that that is every designer's biggest strength, is really leaning into their own like brand of designership.
Christina, what would you recommend?
I'm going to echo some of what she just said. And honestly, it starts with you. And I think it's being true to yourself and being willing to be open and authentic with who you are, what you're looking for, and putting yourself out there. People don't know what they don't know. And the other thing is when you will put yourself out there and you'll start asking questions, secret, people love talking about themselves. So they are happy to help because they're going to tell you everything about whatever they've done. You can take it or leave it. But I think a lot of the dialogue starts with you being willing to put yourself out there and you start asking questions. And it's interesting too to kind of be on the reverse role now as I started to develop relationships on the other side where I am a little bit older. So and it's a predominantly female workforce, which is the polar opposite of the rest of my career. But as they've come to me to ask for advice, being open and happy to help kind of reciprocate what I've been taught. But it starts again with, if I use Sarah in this example, she came to me with questions wanting to learn this, and can you help me with this? And what would you do here? So it started with her too.
Yeah. I wanted to shift a little bit because we're talking a lot about the happy path, but then there's the unhappy path of like challenges. And I know from my own experience, I didn't realize a lot of the stuff that I was encountering just seemed normal until I started doing a lot of understanding, like research. Oh, wait, what was that tone? Like, why is that? You know, like things like that. And I'll start with Abby. What challenges have you faced in your career as a designer, as a woman, as a designer?
Yeah, so I actually am by title a developer. So right now I currently work with 17 other developers, and up until about 6 months ago, I was the only female in the room. I had a hard time deciphering for a while that tone and some experiences I was facing of whether or not it was my age or it was my gender. And those things still are sometimes a gray spot for me, and understanding really which one is potentially the issue or the problem. But the biggest thing I would say is I personally have been fortunate that I've never experienced anything to the point that it's been debilitating or very direct, but it's been more so just a lot of questioning, solutioning, or specific dialogue within a meeting about whether or not I'm the right person to be answering a question or whether or not I'm the right person to be presenting. And I think something that I used to do is I would get frustrated, as we all would, to be questioned in situations where you feel very passionate and proud of things that you've researched and that you're presenting. As I've gotten a little bit older and I've experienced a little bit more, to take a step back and realize that's not a reflection of me. And then if I come to the table with as much research and problem solving as I can, that is the best that I can do. And they can take it or leave it. But ultimately, it is my job to present those findings and that information. And if they are unwilling to respect that, I have to be okay enough to say that's fine, but these are the results, and that is how it's going to be. But it's taken me a very long time to get there.
Christina, what challenges have you faced, or can you think of anything in particular?
Yeah, I would echo the same sentiment. Prior to Crate, which like I said is 70% female workforce now, which is obviously not the norm that we all live in. So that's been a very different experience. But previously, whether, especially in sports, female in sports is a whole other dynamic. And then even in the fitness industry, so I'm in a fitness industry, which is predominantly male. And then on the tech side of things, which was also predominantly male. And at the time we were working through a lot of integration, so a lot of different partnerships with startups, which was also predominantly male. So it echoed the same thing of I was often the only female in the room. And at some point you definitely see it, but it almost becomes the norm, and you kind of just start to just take it by the reins, and it is what it is, and become not afraid. I would say in terms of I'm not so positive. Back when I was in a design role, the creative director was male, and I definitely witnessed how myself and the other female designer were treated very differently compared to the male copywriters that we were all under the same umbrella, and a lot of mistrust and what are you doing, and just kind of trying to think of what the right words are, but a lot of lack of trust when it came to Jackie and myself on the design team. And so that created a lot of unfavorable kind of meetings, environments, and unnecessary friction. But it made it challenging for sure.
Sydney, I think everybody thinks of gaming as being not very female friendly, but I know that when you and I spoke, you were like, that's not true. but maybe I misinterpreted that. What challenges have you faced?
Yeah, so I think women in games is definitely a big topic, and there's so much growth to be had on that whole area of intersectionality and diversity, equity, all those things. I've been very blessed at Raven Software. I have an amazing team, and the leadership at the company is also, they're all incredible allies for all kinds of diversity and not just those in gender. So that's been a great experience. But with that said, when I started that job, there were about 230 people at the company, and only 17 of them were women. So it is definitely not a good sample size for the population compared to how many women there are just out in the United States versus male identifying individuals in the United States. It's a sheer difference, and it changes the dynamic of the office and the work, both culturally and physically. The space has to be different for public health reasons. We have to change around bathrooms and stuff. There's a lot of ways that affects the workspace. And it, of course, bleeds into a lot of the work. One good example I have is that I know for sure, because men have spoken to me about this, men that are my coworkers, that conversations are had in front of male coworkers that are not had in front of the female coworkers. And those aren't always important conversations. A lot of times they're jokes about bodily functions. The problem is that sometimes those conversations become the meetings or private conversations about the project that we're on, and that's where it becomes problematic and difficult to overcome, although it's not necessarily malintended. And then, of course, there are always little blips on the radar of sexual harassment and gray areas, which are really hard to navigate, especially when, as a woman, just like any individual going to a job, you're really just trying to get the job done, trying to have a little social moment with the people that you like to talk to, and you're not really trying to think about sexual harassment or how to defend yourself or how to protect yourself in those situations. So that's been really interesting and difficult to navigate, but also uplifting as we work through those problems as a culture and as a company. So that's been honestly a great experience at Raven Software. My experience was very different going to grad school for physics, largely because unlike on a project where you're working with your team to get something out the door, graduate studies, especially at the master's levels in science, is much more about reaching out to a professor and having them take an interest in you and take you on as a PhD student. So there's very few slots available for the master's students, and it creates a very competitive atmosphere. So even amongst women, there is a lot of competition and a lot of pushing each other out of the way and trampling over each other to get to the end goal without thinking much about how that disrupts the culture and disrupts trust within the group. And that was one of the large reasons I left that program, especially after deciding I didn't want to pursue physics further. And then the last thing that comes to mind really is that, especially going into design meetings, I think that it's really interesting to see how the way that I physically present myself, whether it's what I wear or what color my hair is or how I've styled it that day, has a lot of impact on how my design is received. A really common stereotype working on the Call of Duty franchise is that women are designing for new players or players who aren't very good at the game, especially when they dress more feminine. And that impacts, of course, how those designs are received and who the perceived audience of that feature might be. So we might say that that's a first-time user experience, and this is for our veteran core audience. And where that falls is a lot more impacted by the way I physically present myself than the correlating situation for my male coworkers, where very literally working at a video games office, it's very relaxed. A lot of people walk around with no shoes on. People are wearing PJs or cosplay. So the way that women present themselves is generally a little bit less relaxed around the office because it has such an impact.
Wow. I've been trying to keep track of chat, and we have some questions coming in. So I'm going to there's a great question that came in from Kristen, who actually is one of our classmates. And I'll throw this out for anybody to answer. What ways have you navigated toxic meetings or conversations and turned it around to a positive outcome to move forward? Whoever wants to answer.
I can start off there. Just been on my mind recently about this. I think there are a couple good one-liners that myself and the other women at the office practice, and they might be, I think this one comes from the Lean In book, but we didn't like the original wording, but saying, thank you for highlighting my point, or thank you for highlighting my idea, and then continuing on and practicing saying that in a non-aggressive way. So it doesn't come off it doesn't put the coworker in a defensive position. You don't want to make somebody feel bad because it's generally not something that a person's consciously doing, but you do want to make sure you stand up for yourself and your points. And then I think the other thing that comes to mind immediately is always try to have allies in the meeting. I know a lot of women will pull in, whether they're male or female coworkers, they'll pull in coworkers that they know will support them in the meeting and help create that platform and that space for a woman to talk and say, hey, no, I think Sydney was actually saying something. Can you let her finish? Having allies in meetings is the most powerful tool.
That's great.
I'm really glad you brought up the Lean In book. It's been years since I read that, but there is one thing I took out of that I did the minute I heard it, and this whole idea of the head of the table is a thing. Get to that table. Don't sit in the back of the room because you're going to give yourself a voice as soon as you get to the table. So side note, a little bit of a tangent but as you mentioned that, I was like, people need to hear this. So male, female, doesn't matter. Go to that table if you want to be heard and presented and just have a stake in it. So that is a thing, unfortunately. Don't hide in the back of the room. I would say I've done a lot of work on myself, candidly. It honestly starts with you and being able to pause and take a breath. I think, Abby, you talked about this a little bit too, but to be able to take that moment, that breath, or leave the room, come back. You can excuse yourself. You got to go to the bathroom or something, especially if you're the only female in the room, that's not getting questioned. So you can also play up to some of those things, but allow yourself that moment to take a breath so that you can manage your feelings so that you can have an objective conversation later. Because I think that's unfortunately part of some of the stigmas is the emotional aspects that women can sometimes have. Men have it too. And if you can manage yourself to just be objective and extract out what the emotions were just to get to what the fact is, you can have a more objective conversation then.
And I would just like to add to that just a couple points. The one, the head of the table, I personally have experienced that. When I walked into that room of the like 17 of us, I started sitting at the head of the table, which was one of the most terrifying things I've ever personally done. But for an entire year until coronavirus hit, every time we'd have that meeting, that chair was saved for me, and no one ever sat in it. And to this day, that is a very good feeling, and it gave me confidence in a place that I didn't know it was going to come from. But additionally, being able to manage your feelings is really a very important thing to turn around a toxic meeting, especially we're, as women, we're really known for emotionally and sometimes irrationally speaking out, but men have a tendency, especially the men that I've worked with, to have outbursts and frustration that comes out very loud and aggressive and just larger than you. And I think the one thing to take with that is, as you speak and as you collect yourself and you're in a meeting with others, if you're cool, calm, and collected in response to the angry outburst, it speaks a lot to the person who is rash versus irrational in that moment. And you can get a lot further when you both are level set. So I just wanted to add to that.
I want to, if I may, just finish that, because to pull it back to the mentor aspect, I can get very animated and roll with those punches too. So that's why I've had to do a lot of work. I'm speaking very genuinely of having to do the work myself. And the few times where I would have a flavor of an outburst, my boss wouldn't say anything that day. But the next day he'd come in and say, how do you think that went? Point of where I'm getting here is he would say 95% of the time, you are amazing and you're just killing it and everything else. It's that 5% that people are going to remember. And I think that's gender neutral too. Somebody has a bad emotional instance with you, that how you made them feel is going to stick with that person, regardless of how it may have turned out. But that's how you can be remembered. And so to be able to manage that, control the room with how you can take a breath and bring the tone down, all of that's in all our controls.
Yeah, really, really good points. I guess one of my other questions was, and we can come back to this point. Anytime you guys have a question, throw it into the chat so we can ask. But what do you wish you knew when you started off? Like if your current self could say, as the wiser person to the younger person of you, what would you say to yourself? And maybe whoever wants to start that off. I don't want to catch anyone off guard.
I can go. I would tell myself to be okay with failing hard and failing fast. I'm a perfectionist by nature. I really like to be good at the things that I do, but the most success that I have had is every time I've ever failed. And when I finally just accepted that, like, I was not the smartest person in the room, my growth was completely heightened. And it was probably the hardest, but most liberating feeling, knowing that it was okay to fail and it was actually just going to grow me as a person, a professional, and just across the board.
I think I would have said, you don't have to have it all figured out or all the answers, because you certainly don't know them all. And I can very much say that now, but felt like I always had to have the answer before. And I had it and it just left me, but I'll leave you at that. I was like, I had 2 points. That was the first. I don't remember.
You can always come, when you remember it, just be like, oh yeah, I remember.
But definitely you don't have to have it all figured out.
Yeah. Sydney, what about you?
I think coming from the sciences in general, I felt very much that I was finding the right answer through design as opposed to exploring artwork. And it's much more of an art to me now than I started out with. And I wish that I had been more comfortable with just exploring the things that I love and mimicking the art that I like and connecting with nature personally for me. Like all the things that help diversify my life now. I wish I had been more comfortable leaning into those things and exploring those things and then using them in my designs early on, as opposed to only flexing those muscles later on in my career. And then I also felt a lot of pressure to, I think, get everything done. And there was never something where I was like, here's my list of everything I need to do or what my 5-year plan is. But I very much felt that there was some level of success I was searching for, as opposed to just working like, what am I doing today? What am I doing tomorrow? Maybe I want to get this done by next year, or I want to pursue that. And it took me a long time to start to be, I'm definitely still working on this every day, but it took me a long time to start to be more comfortable with recognizing that you can do everything, but you don't have to do it all at once. And that's totally fine. And everybody's pace is totally fine.
That's a great insight. Megan had a great question I'll throw out to whoever wants to answer it. It's, how do you balance imposter syndrome and humility to grow and learn?
You live through it every day. That's where you start. Every day. And actually, you quit telling yourself that you don't know what you're doing is the first key. I'm learning literally right now because I keep saying it, because that's where I'll start. You guys want to carry that one?
I can add to that. I don't know if imposter syndrome will ever go away. You do know what you're doing. You do know what you're talking about. You're going to have glimmers of doubt, and that's where growth happens. And ultimately, like, in that moment where you are questioning yourself, I just challenge you to work a little bit harder to prove yourself that you do know, whether it's a little bit more research or asking a couple more questions, whatever that is to make that feeling settle. It's like how you're going to humble yourself, have the humility, and just grow.
I think that's really great, because I actually don't have any formal training in UX, and here I am managing strategy and whatever else, and still to this day haven't prototyped, to be quite honest. Skipped a few steps there. But I did just take some Nielsen Norman Group classes last week, and that was incredibly validating, where I was like, oh, I actually know some of this content, learning on the fly as I go. And so you own the imposter. Can I say that?
Yeah, for sure. Sydney, did you have anything to add to the imposter syndrome?
I 100% echo everything Abigail and Christina said. The only other thing I would add is that I like to find self-soothing activities, especially when I feel that I've hit a failure or hit a failing point, or that the design is going somewhere that I don't agree with, and I need to do that anyway, because that's where the project is going. I love having small tasks to do, or for me, a lot of that is playing video games, honestly, but small things were reaching out to a friend or doing a little craft or cooking a meal. I love to have small things I can accomplish, just so that I can grow my list of accomplishments in a day and outweigh my failures in that day.
That's great. Another question here from Thea. How can you confidently go into salary negotiations as a woman in a presumably male-dominated field when we are already in a world that underpays women? Whoever wants to take it.
So I can speak to that. I personally, this is something I've always struggled with, but going into salary negotiations, I have leaned very heavily on my mentors as I've gone through that, simply because they have gone through it more times than I have. And my two main mentors, specifically in UX, have been men, which in some ways I do wish that I had a woman to guide me in that specific aspect, but they have given me a lot of good insight and really helped get the ball rolling in a way that I personally feel like I have been paid fairly for the worth that I am.
Either one of you want to take that?
I am the worst, but I will say, so don't take this advice from me. But what I did notice the other day, it wasn't for a salary negotiation, it was something else. And there was a male that was talking numbers and just threw it out there. And I literally had the thought where I was like, right, he didn't question anything or anything else, doubled the amount that he was asking for. Like, why do we struggle with this? So it was just fascinating to be a bystander in the conversation and ask the exact same question you're asking.
That's great. If you don't have anything to add, Sydney, I do have another question. But if you have something you want to add to that, what do you feel like you have to do that your male and male identifying colleagues do not? This comes from Melanie. Are these expectations internal or are they external? And how do you respond and balance those expectations in your work? And I wanted to start with Sydney with this, if you wouldn't mind, because I know you mentioned the perception of dressing a certain way has the perception of what you're designing for, how that changes. Do you mind starting with that question?
No, I can take a stab. Yeah, I think the dressing is a really good example that you can really point to in video games for how women present themselves. And it's not, again, this is not all women. I'm not trying to generalize. It's not all women in games either. It's just my experience. But yeah, I think that when it comes to whether it's internalized or it's part of the culture and the environment, I think for me at least, a lot of that is chicken or the egg, where they both are the cause and effect of each other. One of the things that we point to a lot at Maven Software is that there are not women at the highest level, at the highest level of leadership. And that means that we don't have women up the ladder to look at for how they dress. So we're all kind of winging it. And that puts a lot of pressure on how professionally do I dress? Can I dress the same as my male coworkers? Would it affect my career? Am I willing to risk it just to wear shorts or just to wear no shoes? So that's where I feel it's a little bit of chicken or the egg, is just as that diversity grows, some of those things will be assuaged and drop off. But while there isn't a lot of diversity, it's hard to tell if those things are internalized or not because nobody's willing to risk it. And yeah, so I think the clothing is a really clear example. There are definitely other things that I think are a lot harder to articulate that women, especially depending on that person's situation and how they present and how people are interpreting them, that women do that their male coworkers might not be practicing at the same level. I know one of my mentors, when I was much younger, almost 10 years ago now, told me very early on that a male mentor told me that I would always have to do the same or better than my male peers to get the same accolades. And I always felt that that was a really good bar to hold myself to. I've been successful doing that. But again, it's something where it could very much be an internalized situation. I'm not sure that my life would have changed drastically if I had slacked off more than I did, because it's so hard to measure those things. But I think the general thought that women's failures are not measured the same way men's failures are measured. And I think like Abigail and Christina were saying before, even like emotional outbursts, even though everybody has them, of course, everybody's had a terrible meeting. Emotional outbursts, bad interactions, these things hold slightly more weight and more water in people's perceptions of women in the workplace than they do for male presenting folk in the workplace.
Yeah. What about you, Christina or Abby? Have you had to do anything that your male or those colleagues don't have to do?
Maybe, I think the only thing that I would say that really sticks out to me, that maybe it's not even necessarily that my male colleagues don't have to do, but they just don't do, but I would naturally do, is share my personal life. I am pretty much an open book when it comes to anybody that I meet, but I realized a very significant difference in just general tone, just energy, just everything when I would speak openly about my personal life, and when I kind of started to pull back, when I started to just only speak professionally and really keep the dialogue in from a day to day, I feel like I was more successful in meetings. And again, I don't know if that's an internalized thing, but I do know that my male counterparts are less likely to talk about their personal lives. So it's just kind of something that I started emulating and kind of saw a result from it. So I'm not sure I will ever be in a position to not take that, even though I do wish I could talk about my personal life, because it is a part of my life. And while I love my job, I also love the other side of me too. So
yeah. Anything you've had to deal with, Christina?
I've been trying to think of if there is anything, and honestly, there's not anything that comes to mind, but that might also be a result of myself, and I just wouldn't do something. Like if I was asked to do something really ridiculous that somebody else isn't, it's in my nature to be like, I'm not doing that. A little bit of context for the group here. I moved to Chicago from a small town in Ohio with a computer car and my clothing, and that was about it. And so if that just like can speak to kind of, I'm just going to do it, a little bit of fearless nature that I have. I don't know. There's nothing that comes to mind, but I probably also have the mindset that I just wouldn't allow it to happen, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. So there's a great question from Christina. How do you think we collectively, as in job seekers, should proceed under COVID with the influx of boot camps and skills that don't align with the desire for senior level roles currently available? So I did see something earlier in the chat where some of the attendees feel like a lot of the positions that are being hired for are more at the senior level, and there's definitely a lot of boot camp graduates coming out that it would be more at the junior level. So I guess there's a general question about how do you think that they could be more successful with those kind of the skills that they have versus the skills that a lot of these companies are looking for?
I'll just quickly answer, if I could rewind, coming out of school, or whether you're coming out of a boot camp or whatever, you have to have the work to show it, right? And it's a catch-22 because you don't have the work, so you just finish school and everything else. But, and this might be controversial, but I did it, and part of what I wanted to do was do as much work for people as I could, even if that meant that maybe I'm doing this pro bono, because some of it, most of your work actually is how you communicate it. And so working with people, and I had a professor say that when you leave here, 90% of your time is going to be spent educating and communicating, and 10% is going to be designing. And I thought he was crazy, you know, in college, and there's been nothing truer. So I think that part of it is building that work up. And if you don't have the experience, go get the experience. And that might, everybody needs something. Joe's Shoe Time business needs a website. Go for it. You can find something and create that work. That way you have the practice, and then you also get the portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. Either of you want to jump in? Otherwise, I've got a lot more questions.
I would just add to that, like in that scenario specifically of being guided and kind of like looking to grow your portfolio. I think that's a really awesome opportunity to do that outreach piece and find designers that you admire and ask them if they're willing to take a chance on you to mentor you. Or, hey, just even simply, I had a girl reach out to me earlier this week on LinkedIn and just say, hey, I'm interested in UX. Is there any advice you would give me? I responded and I was like, do you have 30 minutes for a Zoom call? I would love to tell you everything I can tell you. And that's me giving back. And I think at this point, if you are newly coming out and you don't know what direction to go, find anybody, reach out to them, and someone will respond, because I think I can speak for all of us when we've had such great mentors that I just want to give back to any designer that wants it if I have the time to do it. So
yeah, that's a good point. Let's see, there was a question here from Nolan. Are there any instances in the workplace where you were able to help inform a male colleague of their participation in sexist behaviors affecting those around them that they don't seem to be aware of?
I have had some experiences with this. I don't want to get into too many specifics just to protect the identities of those people involved, because nothing was malintended. I think that there's two versions of this, for myself at least. For working on the project, I think that especially for a video game where we're creating a product that so many people interact with globally, there's a lot of responsibility for making sure that we're creating an inclusive community within our product, not just within our workplace. So there have definitely been a lot of instances where having more diversity at the table has really helped those conversations happen. I can think of one that actually just recently, I think just yesterday, was made public, so I can talk about it, is that for our next Call of Duty game, we have decided to, whereas in the past you had to identify as male or female, I was asked to work on the part of the game where you, just trying to avoid any confidentiality problems, I was working on the part of the game where you create your identity, your character's identity. And I brought to the table with the project director that there are people that don't identify between male and female, and we should not be requiring our players to do so. So in that instance, again, the leadership at Raven has been amazing with this, and they're very open to that. So we are now offering 4 genders in our game, and that's been so heartwarming to put out into the world and see come to life. Then the other side, of course, is for the individuals that are working on those projects, the experience and how to inform people in a more tense situation where it may be affecting oneself. So I've never seen a situation where I felt the need to speak up to a coworker or a male coworker about their behavior with somebody else. But I have had the experience of speaking up to my male coworkers about their behavior with myself. And I have generally pulled those male coworkers aside in some way or talked to them over messages, so that's a little bit easier than having a face-to-face conversation. You get a little more time to think about it. And tried to very much talk about my experience, not what they did, if that makes sense. I really want to talk about how I'm feeling, because at the end of the day, we're still a team. Even if we're not on the same team, we're a team in making sure each of us feels included in that culture. So generally, I would pull those people aside, and that makes it sound like it's happened often. It hasn't, but pull the individual aside and say, you know, hey, like when you comment on how I look this way, it makes me feel like XYZ. And while I might be, you know, maybe I'm too sensitive, maybe this is internalized, and I know that that's not intended to come off that way, but this is how I'm understanding it. And if you could help me by not commenting that way in the future, I'd really appreciate it. So there have been other variations of that situation where I may have had to pull the coworker aside and explain how I was understanding a behavior of theirs. And that's always gone really well for me. I've never had a coworker react negatively or had that negatively impact the relationship. My relationship is generally much closer and built on more trust after that moment with that coworker, because again, these are situations where the person was not knowingly hurting anybody or offending anybody. They truly just did not understand that maybe that word bothered somebody or that action didn't come off the way that they meant it to come off, or that joke might have been funny to some people and not others.
That's a really good point.
I have something I can just add to that quickly, only because my experience has never been gender specific. Mine has always been age related. So I have been often treated like the kid in the room, mostly because I am younger than most of the people that I work with, and that's how it's been traditionally throughout the entirety of my career. But same to Sydney's point, I have pulled those people away or to the side and just had a very open dialogue conversation of transparency. And for me, it was less about, you said this and you made me feel this way. And it was more, I would like to put a boundary on the relationship that we have. It's professional and my age does not indicate the level of work that I can do. And I would like us to be seen as equals. And I don't want to be treated like your kid or your kid sister or your homie, because I am a professional despite how old I am. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. Well, Christina, we have a comment here that Kay Martineau wanted to chime in and say they know a lot of people who can't work for free because of obligations and lack of family support. How would you suggest supporting women who may not be in a position to take on pro bono projects who have design talent? Any suggestions there?
So a moment of clarity. I don't mean work for free always. It's and be smart about those free projects if you do choose to take them. Make sure they're small, make sure they're manageable, you're helping somebody out. Often though, those projects for me turned into paid jobs very quickly later. So know that just because you do something small for free doesn't mean that you're not ever getting paid. You become that person's person and then you're with them for life. I don't know that I necessarily have an answer. It's continuing to build that up. So I would say while you're looking for a role, check yourself. When I was hiring, if people's resumes did not link to their website, but they were trying to get into UX, I automatically literally threw it to the side because I was like, you didn't connect your own experience. So that's my tip for everybody. Double check that if your user experience from paper or web or whatever it is, connect your dots. And I think you can keep refining that. I'll offer myself up here for anybody that wants me to look at their stuff. I think it's exactly that, of try to get as many different eyes and be open to that feedback, because if you haven't yet landed a role, maybe there's a different angle you need to take. Anybody that's getting ready to graduate too, I had a professor that said, don't lead with the education because you look like a new grad. Flip it and lead with your experience. Even if that's something small, did you have an internship, anything like that, anything you can do to position that first impressions, whether it's clothing or your resume or whatever, there's always those moments where you can continue to refine it. And perception is reality. If I learned anything from one of the last jobs, and I didn't want to believe it, but unfortunately it's kind of true. And so I think you just need to lean into that and try to keep getting more feedback.
Yeah, that's a good point. Abby or Sydney, did you have anything to add on to the how do we get more experience when we need the job, but the job wants us, you know, like you don't have the experience to get the job, but you need the job to get the experience, that whole, you know, never ending cycle.
Yeah, there seem silly and they're kind of hard to do on your own, but there are resources out there that provide you with working projects. Like, this is specifically for UI, not UX, but there is like a daily UI challenge that I had participated in when I was graduating and I was trying to enter the UX UI world. And that was something that no one told me I needed to do. It was an initiative I took for myself, but it was a piece for my portfolio that I did every single day to show that I had grit and that I had work ethic, that I was trying to actively do that. And when that was brought up in my portfolio, I was able to talk about a self-done project that I guided myself through, which was just a talking point that really helped emphasize my work ethic. So while you may not have the avenues to do UX, no work is bad work. Anything that you can speak to about yourself and how hardworking you are and your attributes and your assets, those are all good things and good talking points for interviews as well.
I hired one of the designers straight out of a boot camp, similar to you, Sydney. She did a total pivot. She graduated pharmacy school, wanted to do UX. And the portfolio, frankly, wasn't that strong, but part of her story was she didn't really like some things and she redid the project. And I was like, no, this girl wants this. You don't just redo a project for the hell of it. And to your point of that grit, that was the selling point, because I was like, she wants this and I need somebody that's eager because I have more work than designers I can hire.
Anything from you, Sydney? Any advice?
I could not say that any more perfectly.
My class is like, they're starting to jet. They're getting anxious. They want me to go back, but I don't want to end the conversation here. I have one more question, and then I'm going to leave things in the very able hands of Amanda and Andrina to wrap up any questions that you guys have. So make sure you put questions in chat. But one final question that I have is, we've been talking a lot about people coming in, and you guys have mentioned like getting additional experience by going out and finding projects to work on. Is there any other advice you have for people coming into design right now, whether they're male, female, however they identify?
Believe in yourself. Honestly, you will project what you think of your work, yourself, where you're at. If you carry that forward and you're just confident, fake it. I fake it every day. You'll land where you want to go.
I was just going to add yes to all of that. No, too, like, believe in yourself, but like, believe in yourself when imposter syndrome tells you that you shouldn't. That's another big thing to add to that. But then additionally, I know we're really specifically talking about being a woman in the industry and how it can affect design and everything else, but like, don't be afraid to be the hardest working person in the room, and don't attribute it to you have to be. Want to know all the answers, even if you have to work your butt off to know them all. And you probably won't find them all, but if you're searching for them, that work ethic is going to show through in some capacity.
Yeah, I think 100% echoing Christina and Abigail. The only other advice I would give is don't be afraid to treat it like art. follow the artists that you like, the designers that you love, try to mimic their work and figure out how did they get to that solution and why did they go down that path, and do you like that or do you feel differently? Do you have a different opinion? And don't be afraid to talk about that in interviews. It's great to know the designer's personality and how that aligns with the project. It's horrible to be a designer on a project that doesn't align with the things that you want to work on, or it doesn't look the way you want it to look. Everybody does tasks that they don't want to do, but it's great to be at a job where you can really believe in the vision of the product, whatever that is. And I think a big part of that also is just pursue the things that you love and let that bleed back into your work. If you love going out in nature, bring that airiness into your design, create spaces and images in your design that mimic that. Explore those parts of yourself. And don't be afraid to talk to the designers that you admire and reach out to them and ask them questions and ask them how they got into the industry and do they have any leads, do they have any jobs, anything like that. Designers are very happy, unless they just really don't have time or energy, designers are very happy to share their experiences and talk with each other and create this growing community. So I just wouldn't be afraid to send 100 DMs on LinkedIn, and you might only get one person responding that had time that day to do so, but it's not because the other 99 didn't like you. It's not because you're not a valid designer. It's just because they're busy. And reaching out to those people and building your network, even if you have to go totally bootstrap way and reach out to them personally on those DMs every single day on LinkedIn, is really the best way if you don't already have a good network going of UX design jobs. It's the best way to reach out to the people that might be able to give you the lead that gets you into that dream role.
That is all really good. Well, I'm turning things over to you, Andrina. I'll let you take it over. I'm just going to say a quick thank you but while I leave, and I know, Abby, you have to go soon too, but you all have a lovely evening. I'm off to teach some UX. See you guys later.
Bye, Cindy. Thank you. So I had a very important question that we kind of browsed over a little bit, but is how have you managed to advance your career as a woman, a wife, or a mother, and create a life-work balance that allows you to stay competitive?
Are you sticking around, Abby, or?
I can stay for like another 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, so I'm going to stay for a bit.
All right.
Do one of you want to answer that? Do you want me to go?
Go for it.
I think really getting in with balance, it's hard to say because sometimes I have worked for companies where balance was not a priority. And I realized that going forward in my career and picking a job, I started to align with certain values that I would seek as opposed to the most desirable company or product, because my values in terms of my work-life balance and my family were more important to me than working on the coolest product. Now, do I wish I could work for like a Nike or a Google? Absolutely. Those are dream jobs. Those are goals and things as a designer that you seek out depending on your hobbies and your loves. But at the end of the day, for me, it's really identifying with those companies that I've chosen to make sure that my values align with theirs.
I've burnt myself out twice, so I've learned the hard way. And this, when you start a new position, they don't know anything about you, so you have a chance to recreate how you're going to balance things. And that's what I've done this time around, based on the last two burnouts where I just burn out. And so knowing that, it's interesting. And this actually just happened yesterday because I'm starting to really get in the mix of things. I've been there for a year now. And we're slammed, and I'm working a little bit longer now, and it's starting to trickle out that way. And I first advocated for myself, made sure my boss was aware of, not that I can't do the job, and I think that's where I struggle, because he started to say, okay, well, we're not going to put your name on anything else. And I felt inside going like, no, like, don't take the work away from me. And afterwards I was like, no, thank goodness, because I can still have my evenings, still do what I need to do at home. And I think it's been some really hard lessons learned. And now it's interesting, and it's super uncomfortable for me to strike that balance, because I've never actually had the time to have that balance. So I've learned the hard way.
Yeah, I think video games are known for incredible crunch periods. I can say like this week so far, I've worked, I think, about 60 hours. So there's a lot of struggle there in video games to set the proper boundaries and to practice taking PTO and taking time for yourself. Again, my experience at Raven Software has been great. There's a lot of support of protecting against burnout and providing resources like it'd be really hard to get home in time to mow the lawn. So the company pays for somebody to come mow the lawn. They'll pay for people to walk your dogs, things like that. So it's really, I think like Abigail said, it's so much the company that you're at and the team that you're on and how they value balance. I think that has been the single biggest differentiator between good balance and bad balance in my experience. And yeah, like I said before, you just don't do it all at once. I think there's so much of like spurts and ups and downs and trying something and being like, oh, I got my shit together this week. And then being like, oh man, I really don't. I just got slapped in the face and it's terrible. And it's just practicing not, at least for me, practicing not self-punishing and feeling bad about those low moments and just being like, okay, this week I'm going to try and drink a lot of water. I didn't do that last week. And this week I'm going to try and have dinner with my partner because I feel like I haven't seen them in a month. So it's just a lot of practice throughout the career.
Yeah, that was basically, I've heard that a lot of women kind of refrain from becoming mothers, getting married, and advancing in their personal life just because they want to be ahead and compared to the men who don't have those responsibilities per se. So I guess that's where the question was going. If as a woman you have felt that you had to do that, and you have felt like you're stuck in your personal life just in order to advance your professional life. You would say yes, or?
I would say that I definitely had those thoughts. I've definitely questioned whether or not pursuing certain avenues in my life was the step I wanted to take now, or if I wanted to take them in 5 years, because I was on a fast track right now to just kind of go full steam ahead. I think that if it's something you love and it's something you're passionate about, keep going for it, but surround yourself with people that support you. And I think if you are true to yourself in what you personally need, it'll help guide you on whether or not you should take a back seat or you should give more attention to your personal life. I really think that's for each person to decide what their path and what kind of fills them up.
Mm-hmm. I have one more question here, and is, was there something that you had to change about yourself, or a training that you had to take, or a book you had to read in order to make you a better UX designer or professional that you would recommend?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yes. Was there something that you had to change about yourself, or any training you had to take, or a book you had to read to make yourself a better UX designer or professional?
I can answer this a little bit. I don't have a exact resource in terms of a book or a course, but in terms of something maybe I had to change, I've always been very true to myself, but I've also been very stubborn and a little bit of a hothead in some scenarios. So I think just being able to be comfortable enough to admit my faults in meetings or in a team dynamic and just be the best team member has really helped my growth. And just like really taking a step back and listening to other people in the room. I think that's been a huge professional growth for me, is realizing that really working in a genuine team dynamic has a lot of benefits.
I love that you just said that, especially as I took on the role of building out a UX UI team that didn't exist. I had no playbook. Somebody said it earlier, my boss didn't know UX, didn't know the first thing about it, but thought I just knew everything. And here I am trying to build a team out, and not in this field. And I have learned everything through those designers and being willing to listen. And just because I was their boss, it wasn't what I said. I would challenge the conversation at different times, but if they had sound reasoning and rationale, and I think that also helps them articulate too. But all my designers and now the researcher, that's on my team. They've taught me everything I know.
Yeah, I think that I can't say that any better again. Um, the only other thing, just thinking about how I've gone about a growth mindset, would be, I guess, continually educating myself, but saying that with a very flexible definition. Um, I am pursuing a master's in UX, but what I'm really thinking of is just looking at YouTube tutorials on how to do that cool thing I saw, and reading books that are related to, like in my particular role, reading books that are related to video games. Like one that comes to mind if you're interested is Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. It talks a lot about what it's like to work in the video game industry. Well, written by a very well-known journalist, but that book has nothing to do with UX design. What's really powerful about that book and other YouTubes and biographies and Netflix shows is just, I think, learning more about other people's walks of life and building and practicing sharing empathy with those people. It's so valuable to recognize in yourself who you are as a user and what you admire and why and what motivates you, as you practice also recognizing that in other folk. And I will never be able to understand the majority of people's experiences and all the intersections that made their lives what they are. But practicing, learning, and just continually trying to expand my thinking on those topics, I think, is a really valuable tool that UXers very commonly use in just trying to understand the users, even if it's not just in a user interview or anything as structured as that, just trying to be like, as much information as I can soak up and as much experience as I can soak up from other people that are willing to share that, that'll make the design better, and it'll make the product that we're feeding back to the same users better.
Thank you, guys. You were gonna say something, Abby?
Yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and hop off. I have to go to a different presentation, but it was nice speaking with you all, and connect with me on LinkedIn if you guys have not done so already. So thanks. Have a good night, guys.
Great having you. And actually, we're just closing up, and I just wanted to ask Sydney and Christina if you have any words of advice for women entering the field, and like your, I guess, your mantra for being a woman in the field.
We're going deep. My mantra. Do you want to go first? Do you want to go first, Sydney?
Yeah, I think I can think of one of my mantras. One of them, I hate saying it out loud because I feel like it sounds so much sillier. But one of them I saw so many years ago, and it was, I relax, I let go, my life is in perfect flow. And I try and tell myself that in the mirror or in the shower to like pump myself back up. I feel a lot of anxiety. So relaxing into something really helps me a lot. It's something I'm trying to constantly work on. And yeah, I would say that, like we said before, you know, really pursuing your passions as a UX designer, regardless of gender, is, and pursuing who you are yourself and reflecting on that is so powerful, and it will come through as authentic and genuine in your work. So yeah, for me, that's that line or that phrase. And yeah, the only advice I would have specifically for women entering the field, or specifically from my experience as a woman, would be that the people right above you, the person that you'll be reporting to, or the professors that you're working with, whatever that may look like for a person, I can't stress enough how important that has been in my experience for those people to be allies. And even better if the people above them are also allies, people who will invite you to that stage and say, you know, maybe you're a junior at this company, but they believe in your voice and they believe in honing that and they believe in amplifying that with their own and their own status at the company. And then you'll grow so much from those experiences and learning from those people, and just being with a group or groups that invite you up to that level will be, and up to that stage will be, the most powerful thing. So that can be somebody that you cold messaged on LinkedIn, and that can be somebody that you work with. There's a lot of ways to go about it, and it's hard to find somebody, but like once you find that good mentor and they happen to also be in a system that is also allying towards women in diversity, it's really powerful and really helpful to really propel women's careers forward.
Yeah.
Goodness, you've been so hard to follow all evening. I just want you to know how great of a speaker you are. You're so articulate. I think just be yourself. I hope I've come across that way tonight because I am certainly not polished by any sense of it, but just be yourself. I got to figure out what my mantra is now. That's going to be my homework. Take every chance that's offered. And if it's a bad choice, don't take it. But if you are given the opportunity, don't doubt yourself and refrain from that. Take it. You will figure it out. I just said to Kristen, thank you for the messages, but that attitude of I will figure it out has taken me a real long way because I have had not much of a playbook since I was 21. And just believe in yourself. I said that earlier, but what you carry in yourself, that idea of perception is reality, that first impression and the attitude that you bring to the table will speak for you before any words actually speak for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, guys, so it's been an amazing night. Thank you for all your insights and information. And again, don't forget to connect with these amazing ladies, and we'll see you in our next meetup. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Guys.